I think that's a good leeway to kick the event officially off. So Daniel, I think you organized everything. You want to start, say a few words, and then we can just have a talk or two and then jump into a discussion.
Yes, exactly. So welcome all. I just want to, before I start, find out about the two other people in the talk, who they are, because they didn't introduce themselves. Now, once we know who everyone is, so it's Adrian Harrison and Daniel Matthias.
Hey, yeah, I'm Adrian.
Hi, Adrian.
Hey, how's it going? How's it going, Severin?
Doing well, doing well. Hey, hey. And Daniel, I think you were muted, so you want to say something?
No.
Yes, sorry guys. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry guys. I'm just in New York. It's very cold, so I'll turn off my camera in a minute. I think Daniel, we spoke, Severin, we met twice.
Oh, right, in Colombia. Yeah, I remember, mate. No, hard to recognize you. Nice to see you.
Yeah, with all the hoodies, yeah. Cool, excited to be here.
Of course. So I think now everyone introduced themselves. So we have a picture because in the end, it's also about trust. Yeah, where do I start? I think we are all here, as I said, for a reason. Something big is about to happen. Let me just switch here. I mean, I don't need to explain the idea of network states. This book has been published about a year ago or even more. And everyone is in the position to start acting, and everyone is trying to figure out where we are heading. We are super early in this movement. We are even lacking technology providers, which are about to start developing Web3 IDs, so on and so forth. So we are super early. And as we know, like with every crypto hype, it could also fire back when there is too much traction, because I think the majority of the people can agree that this makes sense what we are doing, and they are willing to invest in various projects. No matter if it is our background, being a digital nomad community since 2016, who always thought about how can you organize such a community in a fair way that is not owned by a company, thinking about co-ownership of properties, and that's our approach. And there are other people who, for example, Afropolitan Nation, who want to basically help the African diaspora and tap into this energy, which makes sense. And then you have other people like Vahram from networkstate.io, which wants to basically create a network state for the Armenian diaspora, which also makes sense. So everyone has a different drive and why, but I think we all came to the conclusion why centralized governance is not working anymore. And it's really, it's a really urgent problem we need to solve, no matter if you live in the West or you are from the US or you are from a country where you have a really weak password. I think time is running out, and that's why we are here. We should stop thinking that we are competitors, because the market we are entering is really a €1 trillion or dollar or whatever market. And we need to have a discussion about it, because we will see thousands of those network states evolving, and probably 95% will fail and 5% will make it. Yeah, Daniel, Severin, can you add something here? Maybe I missed some aspects.
Yeah, I like this so far. I have a talk later, so I think we can just save the time, and then I can add my 2 cents there. And so probably we are good on time, so let's try to keep this up. And our first speaker, we thought, Tom, you would make a great opener, as you will be going into network states in and of itself. If that works for you and if you're ready, the stage is yours. Oh, by the way, I'm gonna make you host, so please give the host back after this. Here you go.
Okay.
So you can share
Cool.
screen.
Yeah. So yeah, let me just share my screen. And oh, now I get to admit people too. Okay. Everyone can see my screen and
Yes.
people. Yes. Okay. Great. Okay. So everyone, I'm Tom. So I run a seed fund called Network Zero, which is focused on investing in the infrastructure for building network states, and I expect one day also on investing in network states themselves once we figure out how to structure them in an investable way. Sorry, I have lost my mouse and somebody wants to be let in. And okay, here it is. 1 minute. Technical errors. Admit. Yes. Okay. All right. Full screening this was maybe not a good idea. So I'll just do this. Yeah. You can still see, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, that's what I'm up to. I've been hosting a series of events around the world called Building the Network State. So I've had them in New York, Miami, Bogota, Vietnam, Singapore. Been chatting with a lot of different people about different network state ideas, and some really interesting ideas have come from all these different places, including some folks that shared interesting things about the Quaker religion and the way that they do consensus, which is like a whole different talk that I'm trying to get them to do. And ideas around economic zones, special economic zones, things like that. But the recurring thing that I've basically noticed at most of the events that I put together is, and also online on Twitter and all that, most people have this concern about network states being basically put down by people with bigger guns. So in geopolitical power theory, like basically whoever has the biggest weapons, the most powerful weapons, basically controls the power in that region. And so you get superpowers like China controlling most of Asia and US controlling most of the American trisphere to some extent, whether directly or indirectly, right? And so everyone's always like, oh, well, if you make a network state, then like some guys with whoever is going to be your local power is going to show up with guns and like force you to do stuff. And so I think this is I think it's a misconception that that people, when they hear about network states, they go straight, some people just go straight to that. And so I wanted to address that by, I think, defining a little bit better what a network state is. Because I think with some better understanding of what a network state is or can be, then it becomes, I think, a bit more obvious why the guys with guns don't matter in the same way that they don't matter for Bitcoin. So in order to do that, okay, navigator. What is a network state? Let's get into some definitions. So if you go look up, I'm sorry, somebody is echoing. Can somebody who's echoing, and can they mute themselves? Hello? There, that's better. Okay, so the classical definition of a state, and this is based on international law, this is how a state is recognized today, is 1, a permanent population, 2, in a defined territory, 3, with some sort of government, and then 4, with capacity to enter into relations with other states, aka diplomacy. So if we take that definition, the literal legal definition of a state that's recognized by the UN everywhere, and we make a few modifications based on the intention of this definition, then I basically propose this new definition for a network state. And so instead of being a permanent population. It's a digital first population. So people can come and go, but it is a population. And so the population word is doing some work there, as in the population must be defined. So there must be some sort of census or mechanism of tracking whether or not you're a citizen or a member of a network state. But it is a digital first population, and so therefore it is not a permanent population. People can exit when they wish, people can join when allowed. And so the population itself can be fluid, even if it's defined. And so the next thing is defined resources. Instead of land, which land in the old world is kind of this proxy wrapper for resources, because when you have land, it includes whatever is built on that land, or whatever's on that land, whether it's minerals under the ground or buildings built on top of it or population that lives there, whatever it is. Basically, land has historically been used as this proxy for resources. So with a network state, I changed this to define resources, because a network state controls a different type of resource that's actually not land-based. Network states generally control digital resource. So whether it's Bitcoin assets, whether it's the skills and talents of the members, it could also include land and other physical resources, but it doesn't need to. And the more digital the resources are, the harder it is for them to be confiscatable. When you have a gold mine on a set piece of land, it's pretty easy to show up with guns and take it. But if you have Bitcoin distributed amongst hardware wallets amongst members all over the world, there's no there to go and take that Bitcoin. And so that's the other modification, is the defined resources. The governance is the same, like governance. I think in the blockchain world, there's all this work towards better governance. You can have, better decentralized voting systems. You can have DAOs. You can have all sorts of different governance experiments. But I think the definition, the term requiring governance, stays the same, even though it may look very different. And then the fourth one, diplomatic representation, is also the same, in a sense where you can have some capacity of negotiating or interacting with other states, be they network states or nation states. And so, yeah, you basically get this classic state to network state graph or comparison, where the last two are basically the same, but the first two, you have to modify them for the network states to make sense. And so that's basically the way in which I've been explaining what a network state is to people. And yeah, I think within this framework, there's a lot of room for different permutations and experiments. And I think eventually these network states, in order to be recognized on the UN level, so this is like number 4, diplomatic representation, we may need to start out with actually having a bit of land, just because that's the way that the rules are written right now. In order to be a state, you need to have land. So it might actually start out with like, okay, well, we've kind of taken this archipelago that this country has agreed to give to the network states, and that's like its sovereign land. But I don't actually expect that the citizens of the network state will actually live on that land. I think they'll live everywhere, all over the world, and they'll be citizens within other states in the same way that people have dual passports. So yeah, that's the quick version of what is a network state. And if I've been unclear or anything, I'd like to open things up to questions. And yeah, I can maybe answer some questions around this in particular, or how I've seen some of the emerging network states tackle some of these things.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. I think we have time for one question, maybe two, and then the rest we have an open discussion afterwards.
Cool. Yeah, just feel free to just unmute yourself and speak, or if there's no questions, then
Question here,
go to the
Tom,
next.
from Raj.
Sure.
Hi there. According to your
Hey, Raj.
definition, thank you for your presentation. Hi. According to your definition, would you agree with the statement that big tech are currently network states because they have diplomatic, various nation states have embassies in Silicon Valley specifically interacting with big tech?
Almost, because the citizens have not opted into being a state. They haven't voted for a state, and so they're they potentially are close to being there, but that population, that defined population, that word is doing some work where in order to become part of a population, you have to opt into being a citizen of that state. So Facebook has many billions of people that are users on their platforms. None of them have voted for Facebook to be a network state or to represent them in governance or anything like that.
Would the employees constitute sort of feudal serfs in a feudal version of a digital network state?
The employees of Facebook? I don't know. They're pretty well-fed serfs.
Their defined population, not all nation. I'm just being argumentative here, but not all nation states like North Korea, have democracy of the sort we're talking anyway, right?
Yeah. So I mean, employees are not. They haven't opted into a nation state agreement. They've opted into an employment agreement of which they can leave at any time. So I don't see how big tech employees are feudal serfs. In the most dystopian take of all of that, they would be the gentry, the lords of the land.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So I see there's one more question, but if it's okay, I would say let's move on. So we have the open discussion when every presentation was made, because I think this is probably the best space to really answer questions and go into details. If that's cool with you. Tom, could you give me the host back?
Yeah. By the way, I don't think you need to give away hosts going forward.
Yes.
It is possible to share screen without giving away hosts.
Yeah, I know that this works as well, but I don't know how.
I can still share screen right now. You just basically have to stop sharing your screen, and then somebody can share their screen.
Okay. Oh wow. Okay, that's pretty cool then. All right. So then let's go here. Okay. So I'm gonna do also a short presentation. Let me see if I can. Do you guys see the presentation now?
Yep.
Oh, cool. All right. So I'm gonna, not sure how to call this. I'm just gonna throw a few things in, but it's actually really interesting because I think this ties very nicely into what Tom was talking about, and also the understanding of what does it mean to be a citizen actually, in some sense. So I'm gonna talk about the settlement layer perspective and then about some design considerations for network states. So starting with a story, I was in Colombia recently, and there was a very interesting part of Medellin, which is Comuna 13, Comuna 13. And the place that you see right there is in the middle of this comuna. And up until 2013, people, gang members, did the initiation there, which basically involved the initiate to kill another random person they abducted. And the initiate had basically the choice of killing the person or both him and the person he was supposed to kill being killed. So it's absolutely brutal. 2013 there. Now you see, not even 10 years later, there's tourism, everything going on there, which is like a crazy shift that happened there. And it's very interesting to see, right? Because so one part of this is definitely a huge element of military intervention, right? This ties into the just violence or power is very important for these things. But there's also an interesting thing happening in terms of local settlement, I would call this. So if a tourist gets robbed there and the local gang leader know this, then this person who robbed the tourist has like 24 hours to give back the stuff to the person they robbed, or they will get basically executed, which is obviously very harsh punishment. But the point being is that this kind of works to create more safety there, which is interesting, right? There's an escalation ladder there. There's some kind of process. And at the end of this process, there is violence. And this is actually not so different as it works everywhere else. So I want to talk about settlement layers, and I say those are a fundamental part of human society. If we want to understand the design space for network states, we need to understand the role of settlement layers in human society. Blockchain is a paradigm shift that touches the very fabric of human society, and blockchains are a fundamentally new settlement layer that extend the design space for human society, right? So I'm trying to establish this word settlement layer here in a broader sense than the classical sense, where it's only about financial settlement, basically including legal settlement. So let's go into a hypothetical natural settlement situation. We just have two people, there's no one else. Person A, you stole my fish. I gave you a rabbit pelt the other day. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. That's conflict resolution in a nutshell, right? If there's nothing else. Now you can ask yourself, how does the dynamic change when you embed the dispute in a small 150 community people? And then how does the dynamic change when you scale that community up significantly by multiple orders of magnitude? And chances are you will arrive at something that looks like what I would call a socio-legal settlement layer. So you have a bunch of people, and those people come together to form a social contract. I'm sure many of you know this, right? They give away their right to violence, pool this together in an authority, right? And then this authority has the power of legislative, judicative, and executive. So basically create the rules, interpret the rules, and enforce the rules. And what this does then is now I can, for example, go into contract with another person. And if there is a dispute over this contract, I can go to a court and the court makes a ruling. If I then don't follow this ruling, a policeman will show up at my door. And if I don't comply with the policeman, he will use force. And if I resist the force, he will escalate the force they use, right? So you see that this is kind of a settlement, right? Most of these things, they happen on the contract level and they stay on the contractual level. Only in the absolute edge case, you see the escalation chain going up, but it has to be there for the system to be consistent, right? So execution or settlement depends on a chain of processes that fundamentally are based on the possibility of physical escalation, use of violence. All right. So I say any viable state must provide its constituents with a functioning settlement layer for transactions and legal disputes to enable a platform for reliable economic activity and safe civic life. So now it's very interesting. Let's look at the crypto digital settlement layer. So we have people that come together, or entities, they have keys. Some of these keys are tied to machines that do things, and then those come together. They have a consensus algorithm that forms an authority, and the authority can arguably interpret the rules and can enforce the rules. And then you have something like either it's hard-coded or in many cases you have a smart contract, and the smart contract creates the rules, right? And so here the really interesting perspective here is that execution or settlement happens automatically based on code, and the consistency of execution depends on the game theoretical protection given by crypto economic mechanisms. Or put differently, it's the first time in human history that we can actually enforce ownership rights without the threat of violence, which is absolute. This is a paradigm shift, which is crazy. So if you look at this, I think about these spaces like this. So you have the socio-legal settlement layer design space, and then you have the crypto digital settlement layer design space. And there's some things that only one or the other can do. And what I postulate here is that this is the potential of network states, or this is a potential of network states, not the potential, but that's what I'm interested in. So now I just want to go quickly through a few considerations for network state design that kind of come out of this. It's 6 questions for network state, or it's like an evaluation framework. I call this POGAS. So it goes like people, organizations, government, enforceability versus exitability, rules and regulation, and societies. So people are questions like, how do you identify and deal with individuals, right? How do you decide who can join? And this is then the ID question, civic laws and immigration. Then we come to organizations. I think a really overlooked topic. I think this is actually the most interesting topic. The reason why Singapore, why Switzerland is so successful is because they have very interesting organizational forms that you can use and leverage their platform for economic activity. So how do you identify and deal with organizations? Next, government is the governance, and then the functions of government, of legislative, judicative, and executive, right? So writing rules, interpreting the rules, and enforcing the rules. And then if you think about enforcement, and I don't have much time here, and I want to stick to our schedule, but enforceability is a really interesting concept that you come to that ties to, well, okay, if basically, just to illustrate this quickly, well, I can sell you a car with a contract or something physical, and because there's some physical enforcement, right, police, etc., around in a working system. But how does this work on a digital settlement layer, right? There is no person with a gun, at least in the first instance, that can do these things, right? So are there any secondary mechanisms that we can involve, right? So putting up stake that can be slashed by a court oracled smart contract, or using systems like 𝗤𝗲𝘃𝗃s that are used in Africa, which are really, really interesting, or reputation systems. I think there's a lot of things that can increase the enforceability of a given network state. But then on the other side, if you think about enforceability, you realize, wait a second, the more enforceability I have, the harder it is for a person to leave, and then I open up the door for coercion and corruption again. So I think when you think about enforceability, you have to also realize that there's a second side to the coin, which is exitability, the ability for somebody to defect your system or to leave the system, which I think is actually really desirable and important if you don't want to repeat the mistakes and keep the opt-in nature that we had, that I think is native to network states. Then some questions about rules and regulation. And then societas is everything about community, culture, education, civic life, and humanization. Yeah, these are my 10 minutes. There was an example design, but maybe I just show it, but I don't think it's so important. Yeah, that's it. Maybe we save the questions as well, or one very quick question, and then we move on, and then we have the discussion afterwards if there's a question. Okay,
so the slides you saw from me, basically, you're one of the first people that I've heard actually bring up the part around the business jurisdiction and things like that. And so the slides that you saw are actually the beginning of another talk that I gave called "What is a meta jurisdiction?" or meta jurisdictions, basically network states for businesses. So perhaps the next one we can dig into that.
That would be amazing. I love this. And maybe one comment to your comment is the way I arrived at realizing how important organizations and jurisdictions is that I really like finding good definitions for things. And I actually don't like network states so much. Because if you think, what is the Western world, America, Europe, and all these countries? These are many different states, but they are something more. And I would argue they are a socio-economic system, right? They are society and an economic system. And I feel like if we talk about network state, we want to change these things. I think it's not only that we want to change, we want to be a country, but we also want to change these systems in a different way that works for everybody involved. Something along those lines. So yeah, this is super interesting, and organizations are an absolute key part to this. Cool, thanks for recognizing this. I love this. Cool, so then let's move on. And the last speaker is Vahram, correct? Vahram, can you verify
yes.
if you can share screen like this, if this works?
Actually, my computer died right now, and I think I don't need to share a screen anymore, though Perfect. I prepared a small presentation, and I'm sorry for this. But I'm gonna try to clearly, explain what I want to say. Yeah, that's now I'm connected with my phone. So should I start now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hi everyone, I am Vahram, the founder and board chairman of the Network State Pan-Armenian Foundation. Nice to see you all here. Nice to see that a lot of people have, this passion and devotion towards network state concept. How we started and what we think when saying a network state and where we want to go. Well, the network state movement, which I call that way, was born in February 2021. When after the war in 2020, when Armenia lost the war and there were a lot of sufferings. So basically, what I initially thought was that kind of trying to connect the Armenian diaspora through a network state, so that the Armenians, and by the way, Armenians are present in more than 100 countries. And we have huge diaspora communities, for example, in Los Angeles. 1 million Armenians live in Los Angeles, for example, in California, in Paris, in general, in France, in Russia, etc. So that was kind of a plan, a very basic plan to connect people with each other so that they would start working together for the good of the Armenian state and the Armenian nation, Armenian civilization in general. So that was the beginning. But then we became a foundation so that we established ourselves as a legal entity. And also we are in the United Nations database as a foundation, by the way. So that's for your information reference. But then, after a year and a half, I personally realized that this network state concept and the network state structures are a necessity not only for the Armenians, but for the global community. And of course, I got acquainted, I read what Balaji Srinivasan said, about the network state. And I also met Daniel, and I could also, see other network state structures and concepts. So basically, the idea that now we have come up with is that we need to build a harmonic, peaceful world, and the network state is just a means. So to achieve that very end, right? So that harmonic, peaceful world. It's a bit, it sounds a bit utopian concept, but I feel that I am not the only one, right? I am a dreamer, but I am not the only one. And so the concrete projects that I would propose and that we are working on is that we basically, first of all, try to bridge civilizations, cultures, and peoples. So that's very important. So basically, this way you kind of try to go out of the state, nation-state structure and try to connect peoples, cultures, and civilizations. And how we, imagine to do that. We propose to organize forums for scientists or philosophers for cultural representatives who can freely talk out of state bureaucracy and communicate with each other. Because today, the world's, one of the key problems the world is facing is the lack of communication, real communication. The statehood representatives go and talk with each other, which is within the bureaucracy. So they even, in many, so most time, they wouldn't, honestly talk to each other, which is already a blow to communication. So that's one thing. You basically create a platform, big, global, huge platform, so that people's cultures and civilizations talk to each other via their representatives who are independent and free. So that's one key step. The second step is you build up big, institutional structures, which are again out of the bureaucratic schemes of the states, whether they are in the Western world or outside of it. Because when you have these forums and these conferences, you try to make them permanent. So those permanent forums, conferences, and meetings become power. and you start using and applying to their resources. So this is a very important thing, because there are a lot of projects that you want to undertake, and then you see that you have to go to the state or to state boundaries in order to achieve them. And the third thing that is very important is the security component of this, because there are a lot of, I did talk with a lot of retired military officers. So these guys are also keen on, I mean, getting together and forming a very serious component, I mean, power component that will then allow, I mean, this structure to, how to say it, to show its might and show its teeth. Without this, I mean, this power structure, I think it will be very difficult to achieve any result at the very long term. Why I'm saying this? Because on December 26th, there is a publication media outlet called Divergent Options. An American military officer named Bryce Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, if I don't, I'm not mistaken with his name, yeah, published an article about network states and claiming that in 2050, the United States of America is going to fight in a big war against a network state, which will be in the United States. This is a very interesting, I mean, article, and from the perception of a military officer who is currently serving in the United States. Why I'm saying this? Because we talk about blockchain, we talk about, I mean, technology, we talk about independent cities, we talk about how Balaji sees, I mean, this, I mean, forming of the network state and how it can compete or cooperate with the states. But I would say that our main focus, in my opinion, would be the people everywhere. I mean, because if you can go to the hearts of millions of, even billions of people, then you will win. You will win that game. And it's not like, I mean, you, from the very first day you say that, okay, we are coming to abolish the nation states. But first of all, the main thing is that you need to be a virus in a positive sense, so that people everywhere, in the United States, in China, in India, so realize that the cons and pros of this network state movement, the pros are higher than cons, because if you are within a global community, which is based on the philosophy, on the very ideology of the harmonic world, and the network state is a structure, is a means to achieve that harmonic world, then you will definitely win this game. Because what we are facing now is a unprecedented level of crisis. Maybe last time the humanity faced this type of crisis during Ark of Noah time, when that big, I mean, flood, I mean, took place, and humanity, reborn, right? Was reborn. So this is what we are facing now, is like something like that, because people have started talking of nuclear war, and people have started talking about bombing each other. I mean, there is a hocus pocus in international arena, and the most important thing, the humanity itself is facing a decadence, a huge, biggest crisis of values. So people have forgotten the humanistic values that we were used to grow up with and we're used to living with. So this is a very important transitional factor. What I propose is that let's write down a roadmap of how to make this civilizational transition, so based on values. And the number one value would be a harmonic world where people would cooperate with each other rather than compete. Now we have a world which is based on competition, and this competition is a very ugly competition. It's not a healthy one. So for that, I mean, the Armenian contingent, the Armenian diaspora, and the Armenian civilization itself will be definitely ready to serve, because we, throughout history, used to work on this, I mean, in this direction. If we look back to 2,000 years ago, or 5,000 years ago, or even 10,000 years ago, so people in the Armenian highlands were kind of trying to connect people in Europe with China, with India. So this communicator connector role, we need to take as a network state, this communicator connector role, so people would come and talk to each other. And when talk with each other, not to each other, with each other, then we'll definitely find that great solution. So the first thing, the most important thing is that if we accept that we need to reach to people's hearts, that's the most important thing. Not the brains, but hearts, because people, I mean, anyone, I mean, can be very clever, I mean, bright brain, but they can be ugly. I mean, they can be evil. So ugly, I mean in terms of, their ideas. So basically, that's the most important thing, how to reach people's hearts. And the network state needs to serve it, so that the network states are coming to the world to save the humanity from the collapse and decadence of value crisis. We need to bring humanistic values back to people, and there are 8 billion people, and I think the majority of them would be definitely fond of this solution, so that to get back the humanity. Because if we talk about AI, we talk about
1 more minute, please.
I'm just finishing. If we talk about AI, if we talk about, I mean, technology, the humanity is not ready yet to absorb the technology that we have achieved so far, that we have, I mean, established so far, because the technology has developed with skyrocketing speed, but the humanity as a socium, as a social strata, hasn't developed that way. So our main focus would be to reach people's hearts, that with a clear message that we want to come to build a harmonic world, and the network state is coming to serve that biggest ideology, that biggest idea. And I, as a Network State Armenian Foundation founder chairman, is here to serve it. You can know more about us at networkstate.io website, and I am here to answer any question you can have. And sorry again for not sharing the presentation, because my computer died. Sorry for that. Thanks a lot.
Great, awesome. Well, thank you very much. So we could do one direct question to Vahram, or we could just go into open discussion. I'm not sure, like, I want to be respectful of people's time. I think we scheduled this for 12 minutes. I'll definitely be happy to stay on a little bit longer. I'm not sure about the rest, but yeah, in any case, maybe somebody has a question, and then we just naturally transition into just an open discussion. Adrian, you can just unmute yourself and just ask if you want to.
Yeah, so my question is, do we have effective precedents that we've seen get to that level, or who's closest, and how did they get there? And that's just by the variables that we're defining a network state as having land, having a certain population and a certain amount of assets per year, that kind of thing.
I can answer this question. I think the most prominent and powerful example are the knights here in Malta. I'm always saying this, existing since 950 years. They own a lot of embassies around the world. They have their own passport. They are recognized by 50% of the states. And they come in peace. They don't have an army, and they are incredibly powerful and existing since 950 years. So I think we should take a look at their idea and their structure, because they also started with like an objective to push Christianity. So that's a really old example. And I think someone else can answer what are state-of-the-art examples better than me. Yeah.
I think the religious examples are the best ones, actually, because you look at Catholics and they have the sorry, what's the Catholic state? I'm just blanking right now.
Vatican.
Yes. So you have the Catholics, you have the Jewish religion, and they formed Israel. That's probably the most recent. You have various sects of Muslim religions, and they control various countries. All of these religions have their people, their nation exists in countries all over the world, right? And so they're not directly states. Israelis live everywhere, but not all Jews are Israelis, and same is true with all other religions. But I think that might be a good example, because in every major city in the world, you'll find a Catholic church, you'll find a Jewish temple, you'll find a Muslim. They don't call it a temple, do they? Anyways, you'll find these. You can think of them as embassies. A mosque, yes, mosque is the word I was looking for. You'll find these embassies, if you will, in cities all over the world for these religions, and that the topography of that looks very much like a network state, in my opinion. And so, like, non-secular examples, more modern examples, yeah, I think we're still looking for those. You have, yeah, I mean, Singapore is probably the most recent country that kind of took an idea. Singapore isn't a land based on resources. It's an island. I joke that it's a sandbar in the middle of nowhere with nothing valuable on it. But they basically built a nation out of human resources and exported that to the world. And so that might be an example that's more business oriented. But yeah, I kind of look to this model of like the way that religion structures themselves. I was just in Bogota, and I saw that the Scientologists have a massive building, a Scientology building, and these are like all over the world. So yeah, that's, I think, quite interesting.
Do we? Oh, go ahead.
No, please.
No, I was going to follow up with, do we know how Singapore got its diplomatic recognition in the end through its economic power?
Yeah, it's relatively straightforward. Singapore is an island off of the tip of Malaysia, and there was a small civil war with Malaysia. And the Malaysians were basically like, okay, just go have your little island. We don't care. So they just basically gave it to them and let them have it. And then then Lee Kuan Yew, and this is like a very brief history. Lee Kuan Yew kind of pulled things together, made themselves what they are right now is a credibly neutral jurisdiction in a very corrupt region of the world. And so this became a way for Western countries to do business in a way that they understood, with a completely different culture. So it's like a translation jurisdiction. And it became a trusted jurisdiction because they set a precedent of having fair courts and things like that. And so every other country in this region, the judge is basically worth whatever you can pay them. So you can't get that in Singapore. So this is why, like, Western businesses are like, okay, if you want to do business in Indonesia, why don't you just come to Singapore? We'll do business there. It's a neutral ground.
I may add something here. I mean, generally the question is, do you ask for allowance, and do you want to deal directly with existing power structures? Do you need anyone putting a stamp on your network state saying you are now a network state, or is it more intelligent basically to hack the system from behind without going into confrontation? Because just imagine we would have this call in 2012, Bitcoin is 50 cents, and then we would discuss if we want to contact the Federal Reserve European Central Bank. If they say yes, go ahead. Of course, they will not say go ahead. So it's a question, and probably there is no truth. There are both ways which will work. But
so
yeah.
This gets to cartographer's question in the chat, which is, how do you overcome existing restrictions in certain countries? And the most viable route that I've been seeing network states going is that, being a network state, like Bitcoin, you don't ask permission for it, you just do it, right? But you also don't break the laws where you live, right? So your network state might be about something. It has a commandment, or it has a set of values, or it has some mission. But the citizens, just like if you're a European and you visit the US, you don't violate the laws in the US just because they're different in Europe, right? So the citizens of your network state shouldn't violate the laws in which they're living, even if it's not, even if it's in disagreement with the point of their network state. They should work more towards working within the system to change the local laws, or leave and go to another country that is more aligned with the network state that you're in. So most of the thinking that I've been hearing these days has been around, okay, yeah, if you just like stand up and say, hey, we're a sovereign state and we're gonna like put a flag in this land and this land, then you'll get people with guns showing up because you're trying to take people's land, right? But if you're kind of just starting off as like, oh, we're a network state, it's not a real thing yet, like, don't worry about it, it's basically like a club. Then like they'll be like, okay, great. Well, companies, private membership organizations, these all can own real estate, right? They can own land. You can buy a building, you can buy houses, and so you can do that under the guise of this like any sort of internationally recognized organization. And what is at the end of the day, what is a state and what is money? It's really whatever everyone hallucinates together to be a state or money, right? And so when you build up enough of these people that are saying like, okay, well, you recognize us externally as like a membership club or a company or some sort of organization, but we think of ourselves as a nation or a state. Over time, you get enough people, and people are political power, their influence. And so over time, it's that trend of like, first they ignored us, then they laughed at us, then they were angry at us or tried to stop us, then they accepted us, right? And so like that, I think is the most plausible trend for seeing this emerge, where at first they're just like, okay, yeah, have fun with your little network state club, and they'll just ignore us. And that's good. That's how we get people together, and we can bring them together within the places they live already. They don't have to move to a new country in order to participate. So yeah, I've seen a couple of different approaches, and I think that is the most viable sounding one that I've seen so far.
Yeah, and if I may add, I like this perspective, and I think there's like different routes to this, and it probably makes sense to try to dissect them, right? So I think one aspect is the example of religion, right? I think it's more on the line of a nation, of one commandment of values and these kind of things, culture, community, whatever. And I think that is one driver. And then taking the example of Singapore is another driver, right? Here it's not, you don't join Singapore because, oh, I love the leadership and Gambe and let's go, but it's, well, okay, or maybe you do. Of course. But I think the main driver, the main success driver of Singapore is the example of the jurisdiction they have, where they offer a platform economic activity to happen that otherwise couldn't happen, or would have just higher costs to happen, right? And I think that is probably a thing where the digital nature of network states is actually where there's actually like, I think there's a need, right? Like everything that is international, right? Everything that is beyond the states gets a little bit ugly dealing with these things. And then if you deal with people and it's just digital entities, it gets even uglier. And I think their digital jurisdictions can have put on a real foothold. And then so what I want to say is like, I think there's two ways people can join with their hearts, and this is a way to bring people in, and people can join for reasons of value, or you're offering something that they really want to have. And I think access to community or land and these kind of things are also part of this. And the question is, how do you bundle these things together in a way that makes sense and attracts the right kind of network you want to attract?
One thing I'll add to it, another mental model that can help people understand the transition from a meetup to a country is to think about political parties. So look at how new nation states have been formed in the past, or how new governments have been installed in existing nation states in the past. And it's usually around some sort of political party, right? It's a political party seceding, it's a political party taking power, overthrowing whatever it is. And so you can think of a network state before it becomes sovereign. You can think of it as a global political party that has some alignment of interests that wants a particular agenda to trickle down into the local politics everywhere that its netizens are living.
So,
and actually, that's the worst. The worst case. The worst case, if the network state doesn't get sovereign recognition, at least you've created a new political party with, like, you know, a strong following, right? Pirate party.
I like this perspective. Like, okay, so then one question: if it goes into the political party, or just a general question, I think, like, then if we do these things, then is it right to financialize those movements?
Yes,
or
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't be a country without taxes, right? Like, I think that's like one of the main features of a country is that it's a tax collecting agency, right? And in an opt-in system, that's perfectly fine. And a network state needs resources in order to operate. You need something to govern, right? You can't, if you're governing something, it's not just people. You need other resources to govern. So yeah, tax collection is, I think, a critical. I think that's probably the tipping point at which you go from a meetup of people to people find this network state adds so much value to their life that they're willing to voluntarily pay taxes to it, right? And like you said, people don't move to Singapore for those things you mentioned. I actually literally moved to Singapore for those things. But the reason is I can leave Singapore whenever I want. The Singaporean citizens don't have a choice, but foreigners do have a choice. And the total safety and the rules are actually very reasonable. And the government is the most efficient government I've ever dealt with in my life. I've dealt with a lot of governments. It's actually quite pleasant to be here. And the 4% in taxes that they want from me is, like, you know, the value I get from that is really great. So this is actually, like, I live in this opt-in system here, and I want that. And if your network state is providing values, it should also be able to collect some form of taxes. And I think the early versions of network states, like the value that they'll be able to provide when they're smaller is going to be much lower, right? And so, like, the first taxes might just be like $100 a year of, like, membership dues, in a sense. But as it grows and becomes more powerful, collects more resources, provides more benefits to its citizens, then I do expect that it, you know, you'll get double tax, but it'll be so valuable that it'll be worth it.
May I add something here? Actually, we have already been doing this. I mean, the Network State Armenian Foundation. Basically, any businesses that are created within our network state, they pay 5% income fee to us. So basically, when the business, so we have already been doing it, and we have some businesses. One of them is Highland, for example, tea export. 4 people got together, I mean, within the network state, so they started a business, and now they pay 5% fee. So this is reasonable, and yeah, you need, I mean, to do that way, because otherwise you cannot find resources. So yeah, and the most important thing is this self-sustaining philosophy. You know, if you then get dependent on someone else or some power, then you're done. You will become their puppet. So that's the most important thing, financial independence. As for the transition and for how to cooperate or compete with state, etc. So we from political science perspective, we also may accept that there are certain states, and many states actually on earth, nation states, that are accommodated to some power centers. So the states are a means and not an end themselves, you know. So that's something important that we need to accept. And regarding Singapore, I am very close to Bhaskaran Nair, who was, by the way, the Lee Kuan Yew government. I mean, he worked with 𝗏𝗂𝗪 government. Pascal and he is a National University of Singapore professor. So he has told me wonderful stories how 𝗏𝗂𝗪, I mean, dealt with Malaysia and Indonesia attacks and everything. So but basically, as again I reiterate that you need to convince people that you have a big dream and that your dream is their dream. So when you have that ideology behind you, then a lot of people will come with you. And if what is a state? State is people, right? You clearly showed it. I mean, when people say that, when people see that that you come to build a wonderful, I mean, it's wonderful is like a utopian idea, right? But at least a harmonic, peaceful world where people are connected to each other, not based on state boundaries, but based on network state principles. And we need to write down that roadmap. What are our principles? Then definitely, I mean, people will come to you then to nation state. And of course, we will have a lot of, I mean, people who would try to hinder it from happening. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that it is not possible. So our main task, I think, would be at least start to communicate with each other here, at least, to understand what we have, what resources we have. For example, we at the Network State Roundtable Foundation, we have 400 people right now. And there are some 50 people are not Armenians. So that is very important. You want to make it as a global thing, you know, not an Armenian thing or not an Israeli thing or not a, I don't know, a Muslim thing or whatever. So basically, let's do this resource database so we understand what we have. We make a board and then write down a roadmap, and then from there we move forward. Under any circumstances, at some point, the states and United Nations, etc., they will have to deal with that. Now we are a registered foundation in the Republic of Armenia, is a state, nation state, right? We are in the United Nations database as a foundation. They are a nation state structure, right? The United Nations is a union of states, nation states, etc. But that doesn't necessarily mean that in the beginning they will start, I mean, fighting us or whatever. We need to grow up, but we need for that we need to have a roadmap. But to have a roadmap, we need to have an ideology. For the ideology, we need to write down that clearly and reach people's hearts, so that we have millions of followers. Like the religions got born this way. So we need to bring this up that way, so that millions of people follow us. That's it.
I would like to respond to this. Like I like the energy in general a lot, though I would say that I think that is a good roadmap for a network state to push forward. But I think in general, from a space perspective, I don't think it's that we have to homogenize us and think all the same and all walk in the same direction. I think the way that as like a group of people that are interested and adjacent in the space, like one thing is really important. I think it's just talking about this, understanding, sharing knowledge and perspective, right? Having these discussions. So for example, I would both softly disagree with Tom's recent statement about taxation. I think, yes, taxation is a good point, but I also think there's a design space beyond taxation that is viable. And I think that I would love to explore this. There's some designs actually inspired by Singapore. And then to Vahram, for example, you said that at some point you are envisioning a world where there is network states instead of nation states. I personally think this is I'm not sure if I want to envision this, because it seems to me like very confrontational in the basis of it. And I think like what I envision and what seems plausible and still nice is like one, and can be an in-between step or doesn't have to be, but where it's like nation states, right? They are like banks in relationship to Bitcoin in longer vision, right? They will probably not go completely away. I think there are some things that nations are uniquely equipped at doing. For example, having land borders, enforcing those land borders, and having police and yes, of course, I don't like these things, but they are a geopolitical reality, and I don't think these will solve. And if you try to solve them, you provoke conflict. Like powers don't go away without conflict. So this is very, very dangerous to push there. So you should be thinking. The point I'm making is I can see a world where nation states still exist, but the amount of influence they have over citizens and the services are reduced to the things they are good at. And then they go into a service provider relationship with network states, and then network states become basically proxy brokers that unify and represent large groups of people. And therefore we create a great world, because now we are not divided anymore, but we can unionize around these things and then catalyze our power and deal with these states on a more eye-level thing, right? And I'm not saying that my perspective is right or your perspective is right. I just think it's valuable to have multiple perspectives and encourage multiplicity, polycentricity, and talk about these things and openly exchange our knowledge and our perspective.
And I can also...
may I make just one very short clarification? Thanks a lot for the comment. Actually, I think there is a bit of misunderstanding about, the network state, nation state. What I propose is, when you start a global movement and when you reach people's hearts, you don't abolish nation states. No, the people who make decisions in nation states are your people already. So basically, you are everywhere. That's why I mentioned that states are accommodated to some power centers now. But you, as a network state, you become that big power center, which has that clear, not an evil, but benign ideology of building a harmonic world, because you are a network state and people believe in you, in your ideology, and people who make decisions in the United States government, in Russian government, or in Chinese government, they don't think of bombing each other, but rather they feel, they believe in your philosophy and they cooperate rather than compete. So that was the idea of this global movement that reaching people's hearts. Yeah, thank you.
I can also add something here, something really practical, how to do the transition and how I see what will happen. So I was involved with the Nomad visa here in Malta, where non-Europeans get access to the Schengen area. And of course, I saw what were the first countries issuing those Nomad visas, how could they be convinced, and what was happening here. Right now, we have 52 countries which have Nomad visas in place. Some of them don't even charge tax, like Malta. Of course, other entities don't like this and they pressure Malta into charging tax. What happened recently? The European Union said, guys, you need to charge tax. Okay. But I think when you reach a certain tipping point, they can shut down one visa program, but you cannot shut down 52. And soon we will have 100. The same will happen with digital jurisdictions, like we saw with Palau. They are thinking about having a digital company register. And of course, they can be shut down in 1 hour, one call, and they have to stop this program. Once Malta joins, and this will happen because every country has a specific interest. You need to understand the interest of Malta is they don't want tax, they want people to rent the houses here a few months. A really animalistic interest. And you analyze the different interests of the different countries. Yeah, so I think you need to attack with positivity, and you need to also, what you said, Vahram, a positive virus. You know, I mean, we had COVID enabled remote work. Remote work pushed this anti-work movement where people are like, no, I want to live where I live and I want to work flexible, which is absolutely a positive thing, which led to nomad visas. And we need to be really smart. What is the zeitgeist? The moment the big guys are starting a fight, a lot of people will say, wait a minute, until here and not further. Where do we funnel this energy? Into our network states, and how to do the transition, and then I stop, is in the end, a human needs services. You can call them pillars of control, or you call it in a positive way, like insurance, friendship, accommodation, so on and so forth. And you can just list them, what are the most important ones, probably your income, your community, and your accommodation. And you start to replace the pillars of control with, of course, why not capitalistic means, you know, which spike the dopamine and then people move into a co-living. out of Germany and
Yes.
something happens, they will never go back to this society. And I
No,
didn't
this
sit
is
down
the
with them, you know, to explain them the
intro
world.
for the podcast we do on Saturday.
Okay, sorry.
Someone is Niklas is also there now. So yeah, I think this will happen, you know, and we need to make existing countries our friends, not our enemies. Even we were thinking about how to position 𝗂𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗃. One idea was to put us behind European values, like the ones from 1780, to say if we need to safeguard them, because then I have the support from the European president who lives in my neighborhood, you know? So you need to act in between the lines, just like the big guys act in between the lines. And I think it's really easy to study them. And yeah, we need to be at least as smart as the people who act in between the lines and who are responsible for this mess. Yes. Are there other questions? No, sorry, guys.
If folks have time, I would love to hear about what's happening in Honduras. I see we have a couple people from Prospera there. Last I heard about Honduras, like it was kind of everyone got rugged by the local regulator. So it sounds like there's like stuff happening there again. So I'd love to hear from those people if there's time for that.
Yeah, shall I say something?
Yes, please, Nicholas.
So that's just the headlines, right? I mean, one thing is the government has repealed the 𝗧𝗹𝗑𝗃 law, which allow Morazan, Prospera, and 𝗓𝗃𝗃𝗃, the three 𝗧𝗹s. That only counts for starting new 𝗧𝗹s. Right? So existing 𝗧𝗹s have legal stability guarantees. So both Prospera and Morazan have progressed really fast. Morazan has, I think, 80 people that live there. I'm going to visit it again next week. Prospera has a bit less, but they're finishing the Duna Tower this year. So I'm going to move in with my wife. It's sold out more than 50%. So it might have like 200, 300 people by the end of the year. Last year, I organized 4 conferences there. That was after the 𝗧𝗹 repeal. It's fine to visit. It's great. It's beautiful. This year, I'm organizing probably about 6 conferences. And so I'm going to bring several hundred visitors. Also, so the government is hostile to 𝗧𝗹s, right? But their hands, the question is, what can they really do against it, right? So they have to do something very, very crazy to really say, oh, goodbye, you can't do this anymore. And that would be because there's legal protections against that. So the risk is that they don't honor the rule of law that was set up, which is a risk in this part of the country. I'm not saying it's zero. But the position that we're in, we believe is very, very strong. And we have, I think, the best shot at building something, sort of the Honduran legal framework and zones are, I think, the best and most interesting in the world right now. So we have a really, really big shot of achieving and really pushing kind of the boundaries of what we can achieve and sort of build some great cities and free zones. Like Prospera has 130 registered businesses. Some of them are high-tech businesses. We're doing clinical trials on the island. We're doing drone delivery. We're doing robotic construction. So we have a bank that started, right? And there's more and more businesses coming, right? So our strategy is to, build and build fast. That makes it easier. This makes it harder to shut down. And to see we actually do have a chance to save the 𝗧𝗹 law, right? So right now there's Congress is forming a new legislature in the Supreme Court, right? And it's been massively delayed, right? So where they have to confirm the repeal of the vote. So I would just put the chances a bit lower, but it's possible still to save the 𝗧𝗹 law. So there can be more 𝗧𝗹s in Honduras, and there would also be a big PR win to say, hey, we're here, we can do this.
How much land is part of Prospera?
So Prospera has several hundred acres. I can't say I don't know exactly how much. Something between 500, maybe even 2,000. Because the land is discontinuous, right? So the central continuous territory in Prospera, that's on one part of the island, is about the size of Monaco, right? So densely populated is about 40,000 people. But Prospera also has land in several other parts of the island, which is the beauty of the Honduran 𝗧𝗹 regime. If you can legally incorporate land and then make it part of your zone. And Prospera also has acquired lands in La Ceiba that's connected to the ocean. So they're right now building, have the master plan revealed for a port city that they're building there, right? So.
Okay, cool. Real quick, did you build infrastructure from scratch, or were you starting with any existing infrastructure?
Yeah, so I can speak about Prospera. Joyce can maybe then speak a bit about Morazan. So Prospera is, so it's on an island. It's called Roatan. Roatan is a touristically developed island. So it has 70,000 people living on it. It has about the size of Hong Kong. It's a Caribbean paradise. So it has, so Prospera was basically piggybacking off of existing infrastructure, right? So there's an international airport, which makes it easy to get there. It has direct flights from many American cities, but harder from Europe, unfortunately. And there's good roads that connect most parts of the island. One part of Prospera is they bought it ready-made. So it's an existing golf resort that has villas, that has 5-star restaurants and resorts and private beaches. A scuba dive shop now that you can pay with crypto and then Bitcoin. So it could piggyback easily off of that, right? So the other things are basically just real estate development, right? There's also American grocery stores very close by you. So you do need a car to get around, but then it's very easy. It's in a very, and you can have a very high-end lifestyle. Joyce, do you want to talk a bit about Morazan?
Yes, it's very different. We're both under the 𝗧𝗹𝗑𝗪 law, but Prospera and Morazan have totally different business models and target audiences. And it's in our case, we have about 50 or 60 acres, very small. It's a walled city. It's located in 𝗏𝗏𝗏, which is like one of the most dangerous cities in the world. But what we offer is security because we have the wall and 24/7 guards, armed guards. And it was designed to bring jobs to Hondurans and provide a better quality of living for Hondurans. Now, because of the government's actions, the new government, it's discouraged all the manufacturers who were planning on locating. We had a lot of manufacturing planned to be located in Morazan to bring jobs, but those people all backed out or put it on hold or whatever because of the interference from the government, or they feared what the government might do. But we've sort of pivoted, and it's really because of the regulatory freedom that we have, and the security and the cost of living. Mainly, it's so much lower. The cost of living is just incredibly low, and it's a great place for digital nomads and startup businesses. People can start a business in Morazan, register for like $10, and it takes 24 hours. So it's like, no, we've escaped all that bureaucracy. But that's what we're looking for now, is those types of people, digital nomads, people who are starting digital businesses, online businesses. Great place just for startups. 𝗪𝗪𝗂𝗪𝗓𝗔 is working on sort of recruiting bootstrap. He's started a bootstrap city movement to recruit people like that who could benefit from the low cost of living and the ease of business, the lack of regulations. So that's where we are right now, is we're still waiting to find out what the government's actually going to do. So far, they haven't really bothered us. It's just that they discourage the manufacturers we hope to bring in.
Got it. Thanks, guys. That's been, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to follow up with diving into that a little bit more, because I'm curious about how the government played a role in the development of both of these. You know, so you were mentioning there's a couple different value propositions that you guys are offering for digital nomads or entrepreneurs, but that the government was discouraging manufacturers. So are they not interested in partnering or helping this grow? Did they not see it as a value proposition for Honduras as well?
Well, what happened when the law was originally passed, a different party, the Partido Nacional, the National Party, was in power, and they saw the benefit of economic development for Honduras as a way to keep themselves in power. They were corrupt, but they saw the benefits, and so they encouraged it. And it was actually, originally a Honduran idea, and there was a lot of government support to get it started, but there was a lot of politics and infighting, so it took a long time before the first 𝗧𝗍𝗍. Próspera was first, Morazán was a few months later. It just took a long time for them to actually get everything through all of the bureaucracy and get it started so that we could have that kind of freedom, that we could bring in manufacturers. But what happened, there was an election where the people of Honduras were so upset with the corruption of the government that they voted in an even more corrupt government, a socialist government. And the opposition used the 𝗧𝗍𝗍s as a political football. Like, they told all kinds of lies about how we could expropriate land, and we were neo-colonialists or something. It was all totally false, easily debunkable, but we couldn't really, if you tell a lie often enough, people tend to believe it. So anyway, that's why the socialist government is very much opposed to freedom. They're opposed to, economic development by US companies. I personally think that they're looking to make a deal with China. And China is always, when China comes into a country, they put in a lot of money, but they also basically take over. And I think that's what the current government is doing. They're admirers of Venezuela and Cuba. So obviously they're opposed to free market initiatives like Próspera and, in our own way, Morazán. The Hondurans are very unhappy with the government that they elected last, they went into power last year. Crime has gone up. I haven't talked to a single Honduran who thinks that anything is improved with this new government. So, there's a good chance that they'll be voted out the next time, and we'll be back to a government that wants economic development and understands our value proposition. But in the meantime, we're sort of, trying to find other ways that we can use what we've got to offer the benefits to, like, startup companies. In Morazán, it's not an island resort. It's a dangerous place, but it's safe inside. And we've got Honduran families living here. We've got about 80 people living here right now. Most of them, actually, Alex and I are the only Americans. But there's, children playing in the streets and stuff like that, which can't happen outside the walls. It's too dangerous. So that value proposition, we're expecting more Hondurans to move in. And if we could bring in any jobs, that would be, so much better. But it's just that I can understand manufacturers don't want to take the risk that the government's going to send in men with guns.
That's why I think private cities, free private cities, are a subcategory of network states and should be just the last physical outlet of substance which cannot be attacked. I interviewed 𝗬𝗺𝗃𝗵𝗺𝗆, the guy behind Free City Foundation, and we spoke about this. I think it's not smart to have free private cities where all of the substance can be destroyed by taking away the land. It doesn't make sense, It's not completely understanding the problem. Because, things changed, and then you can be attacked.
Yeah.
But still. Severin, do you want to wrap it up?
Yes, let's do it. So this is
group picture also.
Exactly, group picture first and foremost before anybody jumps. Maybe you want to show your face real quick for this one. Awesome. All right.
Yeah, maybe
appreciate this.
the next action points. Maybe we should say we have this call every 4 weeks. Let's see.
All right, first, let's do the picture first. Everybody.
Ah, you didn't do it. Okay.
Yeah, bring in your cat. It's amazing. Let me do this here, and 3, 2, 1, go. And let me do another one, because you know sometimes they don't turn out as you wish they'd do. 1, 2, 3, go. All right, thank you very much, everyone. And yeah, Daniel, please continue.
Yeah, so we don't know where we are heading, but we know we're heading somewhere. I think we are still waiting for the big explosion where network states will be all over the media. There is a chance that this would happen. There is a chance that millions and billions are be thrown on us. We should get ready in order not to have others overtake our movement, because it's really easy to portray something where a lot of people invest, and in the end, it goes nowhere, how we saw with NFTs or the ICOs. In the end, dopamine wins, so we should protect our intentions. And maybe in 4 weeks, we speak again. What is needed now is a technology provider for all of us. Lena is in the call. She is the founder of really the first basically open source framework, which is enabling those network states. There are now 2 others. We need more, and they need to talk to us. I texted them to be here, but obviously they have something more important to do. No joke. Like, just joking. Probably they will join the next time. So this is needed, and it can go pretty fast, you know. Elon Musk just needs to announce that this is a good idea or something. And this will happen. Yeah. So join
the
our
Mars
Telegram.
network state.
Yeah, sorry.
The Mars network state.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we try to get now in our next calls also some other big names. I think this will happen, because I just see a lot of podcasts, but no real online hangouts on a regular basis. Yeah.
All right, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
This was
everyone. Nice to
amazing.
meet everyone.
Thanks for
Thank
organizing.
you.
Thanks, Daniel. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.